What's up and welcome back to another video. Guys, the 20th anniversary of episode 3 Revenge of the Sith is just around the corner in 2025, so I figured today would be the perfect time to sit down and go through every single LEGO Star Wars episode 3 set and rank them from worst to best. Now, there were a ton of really good sets in this sub-theme for LEGO Star Wars. It is one of my favorites by far. Some really good sets, and this list was very challenging to put together. This was the hardest ranking that I ever had to do. There are really no clear-cut answers of what should come in first and last, so everything is pretty close together on this list, and it was a lot of fun to put together. But without further ado, let's get right on into this video. Now, starting off in last place, something had to come in last, and I know no matter what it is, it's going to be controversial, but I went for set 7251, the Darth Vader's transformation. It released in 2005 for $7. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a fun set. It's a very fun one to, put together, and it's depicting a very good scene from the movie. It's just, it's an ugly build. It doesn't hold up to today. It's from 2005, so it's kind of what you'd expect. I just think it's not bad. I just think there's so much better stuff above it on this list. Up next, I've set 75073, the Vulture Droid Microfighter, coming out in 2015 for $10. Now, overall, I think this is a solid build. It's just not super interesting to me. The droid pilot fig is a very common one, so there's nothing really special there, but I do think it is a very good build. I think it's a very solid microfighter. I just think it doesn't really have that spice that some of the stuff above it has up on this list. Next up, I have a bit of a hot take being set 75255, the buildable Yoda, releasing in 2019 for $100. I know this one has a bit of a cult fan base, and I might be making some people a little upset by putting it this low on the list. It's just not for me. First of all, I don't really enjoy any of the buildable character sets. It's just not really what I'm looking for in a LEGO set, and I think this one is particularly kind of ugly. There's so many exposed studs. The shaping is just off a little bit, and the eyes, the whole head, it's just the face is super freaky on this one as well. It's not for me. I'm not a fan of this one. I know it's a lot of people's, it's up there for a lot of people, but for me, it is not the set that I am a huge fan of at all. Next up, I have set 75269, the Duel on Mustafar, coming out in 2020 for $20. I think this is a great idea for a set. It's a great scene as well. I just think it was poorly executed. I think it's really fun, but it's pretty ugly. There's some great figs in here as well, don't get me wrong, with Anakin and Obi-Wan, and very good versions of them at that. It's just, the build doesn't do it for me, especially for $20. I think this would have been so good as a diorama. I know they weren't really doing dioramas at that point, but I wish that we did get this in a diorama form. I think it would just be so much better than whatever this build was supposed to be. Next up, one that's very nostalgic to me, I have set 7257, the Ultimate Lightsaber Duel, coming out in 2005 for $30. This is an iconic set from an iconic scene. The light up Anakin and Obi-Wan are super cool. I'm a huge fan of the light up figures, and they're just super nice. I mean, I will say it is a pretty outdated set, but it's also a very fun one, and I think it still holds up to today. It may just be that kind of classic charm with nostalgia kind of blinding me a little bit, but I do think this is definitely better than the 2020 version, and I just think it's a solid set, and I would love to see a remake. Unfortunately, those light up minifigures, there are some issues with them being fragile and the rest of this build being fragile, but this is a great build. I just think that there is better stuff out there that is above it. Next up, I have set 75072, the ARC 170 Microfighter, coming out in 2015 for just $10. This is probably my favorite Microfighter. I think the build is great. I think the Clone Pilot minifigure is great, and it's definitely up there for one of my favorites. Good value there as well, and it's actually one of the few Microfighter builds that I think actually looks good. Now, I don't really have any complaints about this set. It's just, I think compared to the stuff above it, it doesn't really hold up. Next up, I've set 7252, the Droid Tri-Fighter, coming out in 2005 for $15. I think this is a very solid build, and I just love the design of the Tri-Fighter. I think it looks really good with all three arcs coming together. I just think that there is better stuff above it on this list. Next up, I've set 75028, the Clone Turbo Tank Microfighter, coming out in 2014 for $10. Now, this was the first, and for a while, the only way to get an updated version of the Phase 2 reg, disregarding the OG version with the helmet slits. And I think the minifigure here is great, but the build is definitely lacking a little bit, in my opinion. And yeah, I think this one is pretty overrated. Personally, I think the ARC 170 is better, but I had to put it up here just for the fact that it was the only way to get that Phase 2 reg for a while. And overall, solid set. I just think it is a tad bit overrated. Next up, I have set 7255, the General Grievous Chase from 2005 for $20. Now, I think this is a very solid set, but it's definitely not great. And I mean, for 2005, it is pretty solid. I'm just not a big fan of the OG General Grievous, to be honest. I think his cape here is super sick, and OG Obi-Wan is iconic. I just think this set leaves quite a bit to be desired. Now, I understand it was 2005, so there's not really much else that LEGO could have done, but overall, I think it's a pretty solid and nostalgic set. Next up, I've set 75142, the homing spider droid from 2016. It retailed for $30. Now, I actually really like this set a lot, and it might be just the biased talking, because I did own this set back in the day when it came out, but there definitely are some issues here. I think the spider droid looks great, but the massive stud shooter is kind of ugly. It's super fun to shoot it all out, but I think it definitely takes away from the build, in my opinion, and I think the figure selection here is very solid. It's just, the stud shooter on the bottom really just takes away a lot from this build for me. So we have another set with a bit of a cult following, being set 8096, the Emperor's Shuttle. Now, this came out in 2010, retailing for $60. Now, I think this is a cool ship, don't get me wrong. I just think it was kind of ugly. I don't think the execution was really good here. There's too many studs. It's not bad, and there is some very fun play features and some good minifigures. I just think that there are better sets out there. Next up, we have set 75037, the Battle on Salukmai, releasing in 2014 for $15. I wanted to put this higher, I just couldn't. Now, I think the speeder build here is very good, but the big thing that is carrying this set is that Bark Trooper, exclusive to the set, a very good, very well done figure by LEGO. It's one of my favorite clones, and it is just pretty solid. I think the side builds are also very good and underrated in this one, and you get the droids, and it was all $15 is crazy. Something like this nowadays would be $30 minimum, and it probably would be more than that knowing LEGO today. I think this was a great set with some great value, and I wish I could have put it higher. I just think that there is some better stuff out there. Next up, I have set 6205, the V-Wing Starfighter from 2006, releasing for $10. I think the V-Wing is a very cool and underrated ship. Definitely not my favorite, but it is definitely up there. I have some really good memories flying this bad boy around in Battlefront 2, the OG version, and overall, I think it was a very good build for 2006. I just think that there are better executions of the V-Wing, as you will see later on this list. Next up, I've set 7250, the Clone Scout Walker from 2005, releasing for $10. This is a classic huge LEGO walker, but it does have that classic charm to it. It is a good build overall, but like I said, oversized for sure. Coming from 2005 though, I think it does have some pretty nice classic charm, and that Recon Trooper, very underrated in my opinion. It's one of my favorites of the OG Clone Troopers. Just a very good and pretty solid rounded out set in my opinion. Next up, I have set 7656, General Grievous Starfighter, coming out in 2007 for $20. Now, General Grievous ship is super cool in my opinion, and this is a solid but outdated build. I think the OG Grievous does have, like I said earlier, that classic charm to it, but I just think there are better adaptations of General Grievous' Starfighter above it on this list. Next up, I have a pretty underrated set in my opinion, being set 7258, the Wookiee Attack, coming out in 2005 for $30. This is a great set in my opinion. The Kashyyyk scene, so iconic from Revenge of the Sith, and I would love to get a remake of this set. It has 3 great builds, or maybe not great, pretty solid builds, and some really good figs in it as well. Now, it is pretty outdated given that this did come out in 2005, but I do think it still holds up to today. I would love to see a remake of this set, and just for $30 back in the day, I think there was some very good value here as well. Next up, I've set 75261, the Clone Scout Walker from the 20th anniversary from 2019, releasing for $30. Now, this was my favorite of the anniversary sets from 2019, and this is another one of those classic huge LEGO walkers, but in my opinion, it is pretty great, and there are some really good side builds alongside it. I think the figure selection is also very good there with the Kashyyyk Troopers and all of the other great figs, and you also get the Anniversary Vader, which was my favorite anniversary figure that was released in that year as well. So overall, a very good set with some very good value in my opinion. Next up, I've set 7915, the Imperial V-Wing Starfighter from 2011, releasing for $20. I think this is a very sleek build and definitely a big improvement from the previous one. I think the Imperial pilot is also great, and I think the color scheme on this one in that Imperial color scheme is also just very good. I'm a big fan of this set, but like I said earlier, I just think there are better V-Wings above it on this list. Next up, I have set 8091, the Republic Swamp Speeder from 2010. Now, this did release for $30, which was pretty overpriced at the time, in my opinion, but I still think that the build is pretty great. It's one of my favorite Swamp Speeders that we have ever gotten, and I think the minifigures included here are also pretty great. That classic Phase 2 Clone Trooper with the updated printing looks very nice. It's very bold printing compared to the ones that we got previously, and I think Barriss is also a great minifigure. Overall, a pretty solid set. Next, I've set 7256, the Jedi Starfighter and Vulture Droid. Now, this came out in 2005 for $20. I think there was some really great value in this set. Getting the two builds for $20 back then, super good. Today, this would be a $40 set minimum, maybe even $50. And I think the builds are pretty solid and well done for 2005. And there's also some pretty solid minifigures in this one as well. Next up, I have a bit of an underrated one, in my opinion, being set 75041, the Vulture Droid from 2014. This released for $25. I think the build is pretty great on this Vulture Droid. I think Vulture Droids are really cool, and I also think the Nemodia Warrior is a great minifigure exclusive to the set. Some very solid builds here, as well as some very solid minifigures. Overall, I just think this set is kind of underrated. Next up, I have set 7671, the ATDP Walker from 2008 for $40 this released for, and I think this is an iconic set with a great build. I think the ATDP is a very cool and underrated walker, and it's one of my favorite vehicles that LEGO does for LEGO Star Wars. Now, I think this is very nostalgic, but I think that is also where nostalgia kind of comes in blinding. I think this set definitely has some flaws, and I think the other ATDPs that we got are a lot better than this one. Now, I will say that OG Shock Trooper, very nice, very nostalgic, and it is technically exclusive with its white hips in this set, but overall, solid set, but I think it definitely is kind of blinding the most people with that nostalgia, because I think there are definitely some better ones above it. Next up, I've set 75044, the Droid Tri-Fighter from 2014, coming out for $30. Now, like I was saying earlier, I think the Tri-Fighter is a super sick ship, and I just think the build that LEGO does for this is very good, and this one is particularly well done. And there's also that exclusive Palpatine minifigure in there. Overall, I just love the design of the Tri-Fighter, and I think there are some sick minifigures in this one as well. Next, I have set 7654, the Droids Battle Pack, coming out in 2007 for $10. This is a great and iconic set, one of the perfect battle packs that LEGO has put out. It's a great army builder with a very solid selection of droids, and it's also a very good and useful battle pack build with that little carrier right there. And overall, I just really think this set is way overdue for a remake. I would love to see an updated version of this, and I think this is just one of the best battle packs that LEGO has made. Next up, I have set 75040, General Grievous Wheel Bike. Now, this came out in 2014 for $25, and I think for $25, this is a pretty good deal, especially getting General Grievous. And some of the other sets where you get General Grievous, you can really feel that Grievous tax, but here it seems like it was a very good deal to get him. Now, I think the minifigures here are very good, and I think the build is very fun as well. I just think there are better stuff above it on this list. Next up, I've set 7260, the Wookiee Catamaran, releasing in 2005 for $50. This is a sick set. I think the build for the Catamaran is great and very well done for 2005, as well as the Swamp Speeder being very good in my opinion. And there's also some great minifigures in here as well, with that Light Up Luminara being exclusive to this set, and also just being a great minifigure in my opinion, as well as the 442nd Clone Troopers being very good and very underrated in my opinion. I would love to see this set get a remake at some point in the future. Next up, I've set 75039, the V-Wing Starfighter from 2014. Now, this is a pretty solid build, but I just think I love the colors on this one. I think that is why it is up here on the list. I think the scheme is very good here, and I think the figs are pretty solid as well. Overall, very solid set, and probably one of my favorites of the V-Wings. Next up, we have one that I think is pretty underrated, being set 75183, Darth Vader's Transformation. This came out in 2017 for $25, and it is a very cool set, and I think just the scene here is also very great, but I think where this goes above and beyond is the play features. There's so many really good play features here, especially being able to, actually do the transformation of Anakin to Darth Vader, and I think the figures here are also very good in my opinion. Next up, I have set 1016, General Grievous from 2008, releasing for $90. It's the only Revenge of the Sith UCS set that we have. Now, I think this is a very good set. I think it's very cool, and I think it's also pretty underrated. It is one of my favorite of the buildable characters, even though I'm not a big fan of the buildable buildable characters, but I think this one was done pretty well. Now, I will say, one of my friends owns this one, and he is always breaking it. It is a super fragile set. I don't really take that into account when ranking it, but I figured it was something that is worth noting. Overall, I think this is a pretty solid set. I just think that there are better stuff above it, because this one, buildable figure, not really for me, in my opinion. Next up, maybe one of the most iconic sets on this list, I have set 7655, the Clone Troopers Battle Pack from 2007, releasing for $10. Such an iconic set. It did so much for the army building community, starting so much stuff, and I don't know if LEGO would be the same today without this set, but enough glazing. I think the set overall, very solid. It is one of my favorites of the battle pack. Maybe that's just nostalgia blinding me, but I do think the builds here are very good with the speeder and the small little post for the clone to stand at, as well as the minifigure selection. I think it's very solid with the shock troopers, or the shock trooper, as well as your regs, and the Star Corp trooper as well, or whatever we want to call that guy. Overall, very solid build with some very solid minifigures, and it's one of my all-time favorite battle packs. Next up, I have set 75042, the droid gunship from 2014. This released for $50, and I think it is a pretty good build. I think it's very clean, and there are some great figs. However, I think that the newer version has this one beat. Speaking of the newer version, we have set 75233, the droid gunship from 2019, also releasing for $50. I think the build here is great. I think it's a huge upgrade from 2014, and I think the figure selection is also better in my opinion, and it stayed the same price of $50. Overall, I think it's just a huge upgrade from the previous version. Next up, we have set 75135, Obi-Wan's Jedi Interceptor from 2016, releasing for $25. I think the build is great here, and I love the colors on Obi-Wan's Interceptor. I just love that maroon color scheme, and this is just overall a very accurate build with some pretty solid figures. Nothing special with the figure lineup, you just get Obi-Wan and your R4, but I do think that this is a very solid build. Next, we have set 75038, the Jedi Interceptor from 2014, releasing for $25. I think this is a great build. I love the yellow color scheme of Anakin's Starfighter, and it has to be one of my favorite interceptors from Star Wars, and I think the Anakin minifigure is also a very good minifigure here, but I do think that the 2019 version has this one beat, leaving us to our next set being set 75281, Anakin's Jedi Interceptor from 2019, releasing for $30. This is everything I said about the previous one. I just think it is a little bit better. It has that edge by just a little bit. Next up, I have set 75286, General Grievous's Starfighter from 2020, coming in at $80. A super overpriced set, but I still think it's a great build. It's the best version of General Grievous's Starfighter that we ever got, in my opinion, as well as the minifigures being great. That 212th Airborne is just perfection, as well as the Obi-Wan and the General Grievous being great minifigures. This is just a really good set. I just think it was a bit overpriced for its time. Next up, we have my favorite Jedi Interceptor, set 9494, Anakin's Jedi Interceptor from 2012, releasing for $40. I think the green color scheme on this one is super, super good, and I think it was also just a great build, as well as the side build that you got, and you got some amazing figures, and I think this version of Anakin is also super, super great. New Gunray is also very good, as well as the Obi-Wan. I will say, something that triggers me a bit about this set is, why does Obi-Wan have dark tan legs? It looks so off. It's just, that one thing brought this down on the list for me. I'm sorry. It's just, it makes me mad. I don't know why. Looking at it, it just doesn't look right. But I also think the little mini build of Duel on Mustafar is also great. I think overall, this set is very great, and it's a very underrated one in my opinion. Next up, one of the greatest battle packs of all time, being set 75036, the Utapau Troopers Battle Pack from 2014, releasing for $13. Hands down, one of my favorites. I think it is second only to the Kashyyyk Troopers Battle Pack, as you will see in just a moment. I think the Airborne Troopers are great. I think the 212th Regs are also great, and they have wastegapes. It's so good. It's such a good set with some great minifigures, as well as the Tri-Droid minifigure, or build, also being very good. It's a battle pack with a useful build that I like. I like when they have the clones versus the build for the Separatists. I think it works really good. It's nice to have a battle pack where you have the opposition for the clones to go against, and I think this one was just executed perfectly. And next up, you may have guessed, I have set 75035, the Kashyyyk Troopers Battle Pack from 2014, releasing for $13. This is my all-time favorite battle pack by far. I think the Kashyyyk Troopers are some of the greatest LEGO clone troopers that LEGO has ever made. They're just really good, very iconic, and maybe nostalgia kind of taking a little bit of bias in this ranking. I just love this set. I think the Swamp Speeder is also a very good build as well, and I just love the Kashyyyk Troopers. Next up, I have set 7283, the Ultimate Space Battle from 2005. Now this released for $50 and it is actually a very, very rare set to get your hands on, but it is a great set and there's some insane value. For $50, you get 5 ships that look all very good builds in my opinion, especially for 2005, and you also get 4 minifigures. This set, I don't even want to think about what this set would cost if it was released nowadays, but overall, super good set, and I would definitely want to get my hands on this one at some point in the future. Next up, I've set 75151, the Clone Turbo Tank from 2016, releasing for $110. I think this is a great set. I think it's a very solid build, albeit a bit downscaled, but I do think that it is the minifigures here that come in clutch. I think the Luminara is super, super good. The Quinlan Voss is sick, as well as the Gree and the Kashyyyk troopers. Super, super good. I love this set. I love the minifigures, and I think the build is also very well done. It's just a little bit downsized. And to follow up the previous turbo tank, I have set 7261, the Clone Turbo Tank from 2005, releasing for $90. I think it's a great set and some very good size to this turbo tank as well, but it is the minifigures here. That Kashyyyk Scout Trooper is one of, if not my favorite clones ever made, and there are some great play features here as well. You get that little clone trooper with the jetpack as well, and there's actually 2 versions of this set, one with the light up Mace Windu and one without the light up Mace Windu, and I think both versions of the Mace Windu are very, very good. It's a great figure. Overall, a super solid set, and it's probably my favorite of the sets from 2005. So I have set 7661, the Jedi Starfighter with Hyperdrive Booster Ring from 2007. This released for $50. Now, I have to say, I love the Hyperdrive Ring builds. There's something about them, I don't know why. I have both sets. I have the Obi-Wan's version from episode 2, as well as this one. I don't know why, I just think it's super, super cool. The Hyperdrive Ring, something about it. I think the build is great. It's very well done, especially for the time that this was made. And they also threw in a Kit Fisto on the side. No reason to do that, just other than I don't really know why they did it, but there's no spot for him in the build. I'm not complaining. I'm super happy that they put this figure in there. It just adds even more to the value. It's just kind of baffling. Lego would never do that today, just throw in an extra minifigure for no reason, but I do like that they put that in there. Now, it is just a little odd to have him on the side, but I'm not complaining. Extra minifigure has never been a bad thing in my opinion, and I just overall, I think the color scheme here, I think the build, just very well done, as well as the 2 minifigures, the Obi-Wan and the Kit Fisto, are also very good minifigures. Next up, I've set 75234, the AT-AP Walker from 2019, releasing for $60. I think this is a great build. I love the AT-AP, and I think this has some great minifigures as well. I think Gree, one of my favorite clone troopers. Now, I will say, it's a little bit inaccurate, but putting that aside, I still think it is a great set, and I just love the AT-AP Walker. Next up, I have set 7259, the ARC 170 Starfighter from 2005, releasing for $40. The ARC 170 is my favorite ship in Star Wars. It is iconic. This is an iconic set as well. I think the build is great, especially for 2005. It's kind of crazy how much they nailed this. I think there's definitely some very good play features on this as well, and I think the OG pilots are very good, pretty charming as well. I'm a big fan of the OG pilots. I think they are some very underrated minifigures. Next up, I have one of my favorite sets of all time, being set 9526, Palpatine's Arrest, releasing in 2012 for $90. This was my dream set for a long, long time, and I was finally able to get it about a year ago. Now, this is a great playset with some amazing play features, as well as great minifigures. The figure lineup here is just super, super good. So many exclusive minifigures, and it is one of the things that makes this set so, so iconic. Now, I do love this set, but I definitely would be lying if I said that there weren't some flaws here, and maybe this is just because it's one that I've owned and definitely analyzed closer than a lot of the other sets, but it does break easily with all of those dark red pieces, and it comes apart. But I will say, minifigures are great, and putting that aside, I think, yeah, for some people, I think a lot of people argue that it's not a very displayable set, and I think I would have to agree. There's a lot of exposed studs, but overall, it's just a super fun set, and I couldn't put it any lower than this on this list, because it is one of my favorite sets of all time. Next up, I have set 8088, the ARC 170 Starfighter from 2010, releasing for $60. This is a great build. I think it's the perfect scale as well, and there's some great minifigures here as well. I do think that it would have benefited from having another pilot. Now, I do like that we got Kit Fisto here. I just would have liked to have gotten the 3 pilots and then Kit Fisto, or just gotten the 3 pilots, to be honest. But overall, I think this is a great set. It's a great build, and there are some great minifigures here as well. Next up, I have set 75043, the AT-AP from 2014 for $60 this released for, and I think this is hands down the best version of the AT-AP in my opinion. There are great detail as well as some great features here as well, and it is a very accurate, I think it's probably the most accurate of the AT-APs if I had to guess, and I just think the minifigure lineup, like I was saying before, it's similar, but I do love the minifigs in this set. I just think it is the best version of the AT-AP that we have ever gotten, and I would love to see a new AT-AP come out at some point in the future. It's coming in the number one spot, what I think to be the best set from episode 3. I have set 75337, the ATTE Walker from 2022. That's released for $140, and I just think this set is amazing. It is a great build, some amazing detail, and it's very accurate. Now, I do love this ATTE. Now, I will say, if it had the crab droid, it would have been perfect in my opinion, but other than that, I think the minifigures here are great. I think Cody is one of the best clone troopers that we have gotten in recent years, and the 212 are good in my opinion. Yes, they have some issues regarding the helmet and the print on the helmet, as well as some people don't like the helmet holes, but overall, I think it is a great set. I love the inclusion of the spider droid, like I said, but I would have wished that it was a crab droid. It just would have been more accurate and made it a little bit better, but I think overall, just the build here, super good, and I honestly do like that it is a little bit downscaled compared to the other ATTEs that we've gotten in the past, because it makes it easier to fit into MOCs and also just easier to display and store, and I would rather trade off that size for extra detail, which I think LEGO did great in this set. Now, overall, that is my favorites of the Revenge of the Sith sets, but let me know down below in the comments what your favorite set from Revenge of the Sith is, and let me know what you would change about this list, and if there are any sub-themes of LEGO Star Wars that you would like me to rank next, let me know down below in the comments. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Catch you next time. Drew, signing out.